What's going on, everybody? I'm your host, Ben Balian, back with another episode of the Sports Pod. And in today's episode, I'm going to talk about the Mets, Juan Soto, Kodai Senga, this starting rotation that has been so good this season, the problem that they might have with all their young infielders, and some potential trade deadline targets as the deadline is about a month and a half away. I'll get into all of it on the other side of the intro. Hit it.
DiVincenzo at three. Bang! Wall, he jumps, it's gone, he did it, Pete Alonso with the most memorable home run of his career.
All right, getting into the episode, and let's just start with how this team is done. They've got the best record in the National League. They were the best team in baseball for a couple games before they dropped the first two against the Rays. They've got the best home record in the league. They're 27-9 at Citi Field. They've got top 5 attendance in the entire league, which is going to be huge come October because the Mets will have a real home field advantage after last year. Yes, there were fans there for the postseason, but it was a struggle to pack the building during the regular season. The rotation has been awesome. There are some problems, but this is a credit to David Stearns. He has been so good at finding the diamonds in the rough, the guys that nobody talks about, and he just turns them into some of the best in the league. Jeremy Hefner's pitching lab is unbelievable. I would love to know what goes on in there because it's like magic. I am in disbelief at how, for back-to-back seasons, the Mets have turned guys that are some of the worst pitchers in the league the previous season into some of the best, into guys that are at the top of their rotation. Last year was Manaea and Severino. This year it's Griffin Canning and Clay Holmes. Clay Holmes was terrible in the closer role for the Yankees last year, and this year for the Mets, he has shown up and he's pitched very well. He got a really short hook on Friday, which I don't like that move from Mendoza, but it's okay. I'm not too worried about that. Mendy's been tremendous all year, and Clay Holmes has also been very solid. He's pitched into the 7th inning in his first season as a starter after last year he was a closer. It wasn't even like he was a long relief guy. He was a closer. He was meant for high leverage scenarios where he's not throwing many pitches. But I mean, if you're Aaron Boone and the Yankees, if you're Hal Steinbrenner, I don't know how you didn't see that wasn't working. The Yankees tried to force Clay Holmes into that closer role so many times when he just obviously wasn't the guy for those high leverage spots. Like, I believe if the Yankees used Holmes in the 6th, 7th, or 8th inning, he would be so much better than he actually was, and he would probably still be a Yankee. He was just never meant to be a closer. He doesn't have that clutch gene in him that you have to be a closer. But when he came to the Mets, he takes a step back. If he gives up a homer, so what? If you give up 2-3 runs over 5 or 6 innings pitched, so what? Those are good starts. But if you give up 2 or 3 runs in your inning of pitching as a closer, it's the end of the world because you're blowing games for your teams. So I think Clay Holmes was never really broken. It was more of a problem of how the Yankees were using him. And David Stearns was able to identify that. I'm not going to lie. I had some questions about it. I was not sold on the idea of Clay Holmes to start the year. I thought he was going to be a problem, but I also thought he would have eventually came out of the bullpen. But as it stands right now, it does not seem like Holmes will be going back to the bullpen anytime soon. And then to Griffin Canning. He has really... David Stearns and Jeremy Hefner, they've really worked with Canning to skew his pitch usage. Like last year, he would always use that kick change. His changeup is really good, yeah, but the Mets have worked on using the fastball more and getting ahead in counts, where last year Canning was one of the bottom 5 pitchers in the entire sport. This year, he has been probably the Mets' 2nd or 3rd best starter, and Kodai Senga has the best ERA in the National League. And I'm going to get into some Kodai Senga stuff right now, starting with his hamstring injury. It is not Pete Alonso's fault that Senga got hurt jumping up to catch a ball. Injuries happen. Baseball is baseballing. That's the sport. Pitchers get injured. You need to have starting pitcher depth. You need to have guys in AAA that you can just tag at any time and say, you're in. When your ace goes down, yeah, it sucks. When your guy that has one of the highest ERAs in Major League Baseball goes down, yeah, it sucks. But you have to be ready for that entering this season. And the Mets have. And I'm putting this more on the fan base, where booing Pete Alonso is absolutely unacceptable. Pete has been so good for the Mets this year. He's finally hitting. Last year he had a down year, and this year he showed up, and he's just a completely different player. He got a little bit of a contract. He's one of the highest paid first basemen in the sport. He has the option to come back next year, and I think that's taken a lot of pressure off of him. But the other thing that's taken pressure off of him is Juan Soto, one of the best hitters in baseball. He's been one of the best players for the past six years or so. Ever since he broke into the league in 2019 with the Washington Nationals, Juan Soto has been one of the best hitters and one of the best players in the sport. Having that protection for Pete, it's really Pete protecting Soto, but it's more of a two-way street where it goes both ways. People don't want to pitch to Alonso, so they've got to pitch to Soto. But people also don't really want to pitch to Soto, so Alonso gets more opportunities. The Mets have depth in their lineup. Their big three of Francisco Lindor, Juan Soto, and Pete Alonso has been so good this season, and I love what Mendoza has done, moving Juan Soto to the 3-hole instead of hitting him second, because he saw, yeah, that's not working. Soto is one of the best hitters, one of the best young hitters we have ever seen, ever, dating back to the start of the MLB. Juan Soto is up there with Willie Mays, with Ted Williams, all these guys, that Mickey Mantle. Those are like huge names, like Hall of Fame guys, obviously, but number retired guys, and we have him. I cannot understand how Mets fans are so quick to turn on him. I mean, he's going to be here in Queens for the next 15 years. I am going to be 31 years old by the time his contract expires. And we're just going to yell about him hitting .230 for all 15 years? He's gonna break out eventually. Stick with it. Don't get down on him too soon, because he's not going anywhere. And over the past couple weeks, it has looked like he's getting his swagger back. It was really that first series against the Rockies when they played at Citi Field before the Mets headed out west to play the Dodgers in that 4-game series, which they split, where I noticed Soto kind of getting back to what he does, staring down the pitcher, stepping out of the box, nodding at the umpires, watching his home runs fly, having that confidence that he seemed to have lacked the first couple months of this season. And that is going to be the biggest part of him getting back on track. Juan Soto needs to play Juan Soto baseball. He's got to be confident. He's got to be a little bit cocky, a little bit arrogant, but that's his game. You don't see other guys shuffling at pitches, stepping towards pitchers. You don't see that. There is a reason why Juan Soto does it, and there is a reason that Juan Soto is one of the best hitters, because they are connected. They're connected. His confidence correlates to his play. And I think that over the first it was like 8 weeks that he wasn't himself. And now over the last 12, 13 games, he's hitting nearly 400 with a 1350 OPS. He's getting back to being himself. It's just going to take some time. He had to figure some stuff out. He had to work out the kinks. I mean, he's played on 4 different teams in the past 3 seasons now. So give him time. This doesn't have to be a right now thing. We need him playing his best baseball in October. We need him hitting homers when it matters. And I think I've said this before, but I would argue the Mets still winning and having one of the top records in the sport is more encouraging with Juan Soto not playing well. Just imagine what's going to happen when he gets going. The Mets are in a perfect situation right now. They didn't get off to a slow start. Francisco Lindor didn't get off to a slow start. And I'm going to talk about his foot injury in a little bit. But staying on the topic of Juan Soto for just a little bit, he's hit into a ton of tough luck. I mean, that ball he hit in the first game against the Rays, I think it was the 7th inning. There was one guy on. He smoked it. I think he hit it 110 miles an hour. It had an expected batting average of 990. That means there was such an off chance of being a fly out to the warning track. I mean, that ball was hit so hard, it was hit so well, and just right at the guy. The Rays right fielder also made a nice play on it, but it was hit really right at him. So that's baseball, Susan. You can't get down on him for that. Those are the type of play. That's the kind of contact that you want him to make. He's hitting the ball well right there. And now getting back to Francisco Lindor, I know I teased it a couple seconds ago. I think his foot injury has been wearing on him a little bit. He's still playing well. It's not like he's completely fallen off a cliff, but I do think that his production has taken a hit ever since he missed whatever it was, 3 or 4 games with that injury. So looking at his stats right now, he's still hitting .282 with a .354 OBP and an .835 OPS on the season. So he's still hitting very well. He's still playing high-level baseball. It's just fallen off in the past week or two where when he made that pinch hit appearance against the Rockies, yeah, that was nice, but he sucked in the last series. I forget who it was against the Nationals. I think he was 2 for 11 in that series. So if the Mets need to put him on the 15-day IL, the 10-day IL, just to get him back producing at the level he was, just to get him back to being that leader, the captain of this team, where he's still a leader, but it's just not the same when you're not hitting 300 and just raking all the time. The Mets, I would consider putting him on the 10-day IL. You've got such a cushion in the National League East right now. I mean, they've really opened up a pretty wide margin. They're up 3.5 games. That's actually gone down over the past 2 days because they've lost the last 2 games. But if they can live with Lindor not hitting and not playing the field for 10 days, I don't think that's too big of an issue. And maybe you just sit him out. The problem is Lindor is one of these guys where you can't take him off the field. He doesn't let you. So it's really a tough situation for Mendoza and Stearns, but the health of your player has to come first. The status of your perennial all-star, your leader, has to come first. You need to put the team first in this situation. Put him on the 10-day IL. He'll be back before the end of June, and then he'll continue to do what he does. He's been so good for the Mets this year. He's really just changed the direction of this team since taking over that leadoff spot. Then that's another Mendoza and Stearns masterclass. They are so good at making these decisions. And now let's get to another couple decisions that they're going to have to make coming up here with their young infielders. They've got 4 guys really competing for 2 spots. You got Mark Vientos, Ronnie Mauricio, who is new into the fold, Brett Beatty, and Luis Angel Acuna. Acuna plays second and third. Vientos and Beatty solely play third. They could both play first as well, but you're not going to move Pete Alonso off first unless he elects to walk in free agency. But then you also have Ronnie Mauricio, who Mauricio hasn't played exceptionally well since getting called up due to Mark Vientos hitting the IL, but he's been solid at bat at the end of the Rays game where he took 3 strikes looking. It was completely uncompetitive in a clutch situation. It's fine now, but if you get to October and you're still doing that kind of stuff, that's when it's not okay. So you got to work out those kinks. That's what the regular season is for. The hitting with runners in scoring position does have to be better, but getting to these young infielders, Acuna, I would say he brings the most athleticism, the most speed. He steals a bunch of bases, but Mauricio can also run. Mauricio is also an athlete. Brett Baty finally looks like he belongs. He's in a slump as of the last 2 weeks or so, but overall, he's been playing his best baseball of his career this season. Mark Vientos has not played as well as the Mets fans hoped this season, and I'm starting to worry that that month of October last year was the best we're going to see out of him. Ronnie Mauricio, I just said it. He's the new kid on the block. He tore his ACL last year. That's why he wasn't up at all in 2024, but we've seen a little bit out of him. He hasn't looked great, but he also hasn't looked bad. I'm willing to give him more time to develop. So right now, my dream infield, Pete Alonso at first, Jeff McNeil at second, but I would still platoon Acuna with him, lefty-righty, because McNeil has been playing well. We're getting happy Jeff this year. We're getting the Jeff McNeil that we saw for those 2 weeks out of the All-Star break before he broke his hand last year. But so you're platooning Jeff McNeil and Luis Angel Acuna at second base. And at shortstop, obviously you got Francisco Lindor. But if you're going to put Lindor on the 10-day IL, I would consider playing Mauricio at short. That way you still get Acuna in his predominant position, which has been second base in the bigs. I know he came up as a shortstop, but I would keep him at second base because that's where he's going to be playing for the majority of his career with the Mets until Francisco Lindor retires or his contract expires 8 or 9 years down the line. I'm not worried about that right now. I would keep Acuna at second, platooning with McNeil. Both of them can play the outfield, so you have flexibility there. Mauricio just plays the infield, and he's only played on the left side of the infield so far at third base. And then Brett Baty, I would keep him at third base right now. I would start Brett Baty at third base daily, unless you want I'm not even sure unless you want the hot hitter. But neither of Ronnie Mauricio or Brett Baty are hot right now. I would say Mauricio is probably a little bit hotter, but he's not even playing well, and neither is Ronnie Mauricio. So right now, I would stick with Mauricio for a little bit longer, I would say for the next week or so. So you really see what you have in Mauricio. Maybe you send him back down when Vientos comes back up. David Stearns has such a difficult decision right now. And the other thing that I'm going to get into as this episode is waning is, what do you do at the trade deadline? Do you keep all four of these guys for the scenario that Pete Alonso walks? Then you would move either Mark Vientos or Brett Baty to first base, and then you would have the other play third, and there's still an odd man out. Or if Pete Alonso walks, do you move Juan Soto from right field to first base? You can move Brandon Nimmo to right field maybe, and then you play either Acuna or Mauricio in the outfield. Those are the athletes. Both of those guys took reps in the outfield as they were coming up. The Mets have such an interesting decision to make. So right now, Pete Alonso and Francisco Lindor are the givens on the infield. You have second base and third base to play around with, and right now, Jeff McNeil deserves to be playing second base nearly every day because he has been playing like batting champ Jeff McNeil. He's such a bipolar player, but the Mets are getting the good version of him right now, so you can't really favor Acuna over him. I still believe Billy Epler was very quick to give Jeff McNeil that contract, but right now you got to take advantage of him when he's hitting well, because in a couple weeks we might be having a completely different conversation about Jeff, where he's slamming his helmet again, he's cursing after flying out to the infield, flying out to the shallow outfield. But right now you got to stick with him while he's playing well, because eventually it will be Acuna who takes over at second base. That could happen next year. That could happen 2 years from now. It could happen by the end of this season. We don't know. And that's where it comes down to Mendoza. It comes down to David Stearns. Those are the guys that have to make the decisions. And they've done a really good job, so I'm going to trust what they've done. But this is a really tough situation, and it is a good problem to have. You have too many solid players for the limited amount of spots. The problem is that the challenge is, what do you turn the odd man out into? I would say Brett Baty is still going to be the odd man out. It's either going to be Beatty or Vientos. I'm still trusting Beatty because I've seen him do it in the playoffs. I've never seen Brett Beatty do it in October. Now let's move on to the final part of this episode, some trade deadline targets. So the two positions that I think the Mets need the most, they need a center fielder and they need starting pitching. The center fielder, Tyrone Taylor's been good for you, but I just think there's another level that the Mets can unlock if they get a really solid center fielder. Starting off with Jarren Duran from the Boston Red Sox. This one is going to take a lot to get. You're probably going to have to give up one of your coveted prospects, which leads me to believe David Stearns doesn't really want to do it, especially with guys like Jet Williams and Drew Gilbert on the farm. But right now, I'm looking at a Mets team that has the ability to win the World Series this season with some simple upgrades. And if it takes giving up Williams or Gilbert, I'm willing to do it. I know the Mets are looking to build a perennial winner, but I want a World Series now. I have never seen a championship, and a lot of Mets fans older than me haven't either. The Mets are looking to break a drought in which they haven't won since 1986. It is 2025. You could do the math. That's 39 years. If it takes giving up Drew Gilbert or Jet Williams, maybe even both of them to get Jarren Duran, if the Mets can win the World Series like that, so be it if they suck in another 10 years. I want a World Series. There are some other options I have on here that are going to be less expensive. The other problem I do see with Duran, he's kind of one of these all business guys. He's a tough player. He's not going to feed into this happy energy that the Mets have. He's showing up. He's going to work, which I can respect. I just don't know how he's going to get along with some of the other guys on this Met roster. Next up, Luis Robert from the White Sox. I'm not in love with it because he sucked this season, but the price will be low to buy him. And we have seen Luis Robert produce at an all-star level before in the major leagues. So if I'm David Stearns, I'm not going to have to give up a bunch for him. It's going to be cash considerations and some no-name prospect, maybe two of them. Those guys that don't exist until they show up and they turn into Fernando Tatis Jr. Like the White Sox shipped off Tatis to the Padres in a deal that he was not a very highly touted prospect, I don't believe. And then the last option I have for center field is Brenton Doyle. The Rockies are historically bad this year, and if you can send a couple prospects to Colorado to get a pretty good center fielder, I would be okay with that. I mean, I like what I saw out of Doyle last season. I like what I see out of Doyle this year. He's easily the Rockies' best player, in my opinion. I would be willing to take the risk, even if it is trading with Colorado, who sucks. But I think Doyle could be a good fit for the Mets. He could roam center field. He's speedy. He could steal some bases. He can hit a little bit. He would probably slot in 6th, 7th, or 8th in the lineup because you have so much talent in this roster. I would say even 5 he could hit, but that'd be pushing it a little bit. That wraps up my center fielders. The other name I saw, the two names actually, Cedric Mullins and Brian Reynolds. I think it's going to take too much for not as much production. If you're going to give up more prospects, I would rather give up the most and get Jarren Duran. In my opinion, there's 3 tiers. There's Jarren Duran, there's Luis Robert on the bottom, and then in the middle, you got Doyle, Mullins, and Brian Reynolds. That's like the hierarchy of center fielders that the Mets could trade for. And now moving to the pitching, this guy would be so awesome to trade for, but I just doubt David Stearns does it. It's Jacob deGrom, one of the greatest starting pitchers in New York Mets history. I would love to see him back in the orange and blue. The reason I say that Stearns would never make a trade like this is because he's an aging starting pitcher that is injury prone. David Stearns does not have a track record of trading for starting pitchers that are in their 30s, that are getting closer to retirement. he would rather trade for a prospect that's going to be with the Mets in a year or two. But bringing DeGrom back would just be such a jolt to this fan base. Seeing him warm up on that Citi Field mound back in orange and blue for the first time would be so surreal. I would love to bring DeGrom back. It's different management than what he walked away from. It's different ownership than what he walked away from. Bring Jacob DeGrom back to Queens. Bring him back to Citi Field and gear up for a championship run. The other two options are both from the Arizona Diamondbacks. The first one is Merrill Kelly. He's been solid this year for Arizona. The only problem is the Diamondbacks are only 2.5 games back of a wild card spot, so I'm not sure that they would be willing to part ways with their top starting pitcher. And the other guy is Zach Gallen, who has struggled this year, but he has been a Cy Young candidate in the past, so I would be willing to bring him in. You would buy low, and he's somebody that you could sell high on if he does work in the offseason. I think he has an expiring contract, so he would walk, so that would make that point invalid. But he's an expiring contract, which means the Diamondbacks would want to move off him more. They would want to get some return for him. And those are some guys that I would be willing to trade for because you need starting pitching depth. You can't go on a postseason run if you don't have pitching depth. We see it with Kodai Senga. I want to get Tyler McGill out of this rotation. The boos were raining down on him last night after he gave up a couple bombs and he faced 10 batters in the fourth inning. And he only retired 2 of them. This is a guy, Tyler McGill, I'm done with this experiment. He gave you a couple good weeks in 2022, but he hasn't done much since then. Yes, he's shown flashes, but he's not a championship caliber starting pitcher. So I would be willing for the Mets to move off of him. Paul Blackburn hasn't looked good for me. And for the fans saying to move off of Ryan Stanek, absolutely not. He's going to show up in October when the games really matter. All right, that's going to do it for this episode. If you enjoyed, please consider commenting, subscribing, following, liking, downloading it, sharing it with a friend. I really appreciate it. Also, if you want an official The Sports Pod sticker, hit me in my DMs at Instagram. It's linked in the description below at thesportspod_Ben. Check out all my links in the description below. I post on Instagram quite a bit, so check out everything down below. Also, leave me a voicemail at 848-305-8073. That's 848-305-8073 with your sports questions and takes. I'll react to all the voicemails in the next episode. And most importantly, make sure you keep it locked with the Sports Pod.